All right, good evening, everyone. I hope you all had a good weekend. We're back in it today, Chapter 6. This will be the last week for this course, and then we'll be done with it. You'll be moving on to the next course. So we're halfway there. Halfway there, man. Halfway there. So last Thursday and Friday, we were talking about seller agency and buyer agency. Tonight we're doing intermediary, or for when you're representing more than one party. What? So we've talked about intermediary before, but tonight we're going to go into a little more detail and explain it a little bit better. All right, so our outline for this evening. We're going to go over the path from dual agency to intermediary brokerage. We're going to represent the more than one party in a transaction, and we're going to go over representing more than one party in a transaction. We're going to go over intermediary brokerage, specialized intermediary applications, and intentional versus unintentional dual representation. So we don't have a huge outline. It's probably going to be a bit of a shorter class. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the path to intermediary brokerage. There's common law dual agency, and then there's statutory dual agency. In Texas, we actually don't allow dual agency. So we allow for intermediary brokerage, which was in January 1996 when that came about. And then by 2005, they had outlawed common law dual agency. So in Texas, I don't know for other states, some other states might allow dual agency. But in Texas, you're not allowed to do dual agency. Remember, I was talking the other day about if you accidentally end up representing a dual agency, if your actions make you accidentally into a dual agency, it can get you in a lot of trouble. But we had common law and statutory, and the statutory was removed from TRELA in 1996, but it started in 1993. So 3 years later, they removed it from the Texas Real Estate Licensing Act. And then we got intermediary brokerage and common law dual agency removed in 2005. Okay, so when you're representing more than one party, the general is statutory and common law. When you're thinking statutory, you can think, you can just call it black letter law because it's in writing. So anything statutory is already going to be in a book or in a law like that. And then common law is going to be more of a judge-made law. That's when a court case happened or a judge actually had to make a law because of it. So when you're thinking statutory is black letter law, and then common law is judge-made. But both parties must be fully informed. So that doesn't just mean I get you to sign the intermediary form. Say if I'm in a rush one day and I say, hey, to my client, Wyatt, hey, I need you to sign this for me. Sign it real quick. I need to get out of here real quick. I don't explain exactly what it is. Then they're not fully informed. They just sign something saying, okay, yeah, you can be an intermediary without actually knowing what they did. So they must be fully informed, and it has to be written. So, like I said, if I just get them to sign the contract, they're not technically fully informed. They just say, yeah, I'm going to sign the contract. And that can happen. You'll get busy sometimes, and you may forget, or you say, hey, I need to get this signed real quick. Gotta go. That can happen. But when you're doing a dual representation, you got to make sure that both parties are completely aware and informed about what's going on. So there are going to be conflicting positions of the two clients. So of course the seller wants to get the highest price for their property, right? They want to get the most money they can for the property. But then the buyer, they want to pay the lowest price, right? So you can have conflicting positions there of the two clients, especially in intermediary. Because they both want, one person wants to get rid of the house, one person wants to buy the house, but they're both on different sides. And we'll go into more detail on the different types of intermediary tonight. But there can be conflicting positions for sure that could arise. I've actually only done intermediary once myself. And it went well, but like we said, yeah, we had to make sure that everybody knew exactly, hey, we're going to do intermediary. But we knew both parties, so it worked out. Have you done intermediary yet before?
I almost wasn't one, but
Almost?
yeah.
Did you know the parties at all?
Yeah, that's what, it was my dad, his best friend, so yeah.
So that'll happen, especially if you have family members.
Yeah.
You'll probably do an intermediary status at some point because they want you to get the full 6%, right?
Yeah.
All right, so common law dual agency, this implied dual agency, it's agency by your actions. Remember, if I do something that makes you think I'm representing you, then I probably am. And that can lead you into a dual agency. So it's undisclosed and non-consensual dual agency. In other words, it just kind of happened because of stuff we did. We didn't tell anybody. It was undisclosed. Nobody knew about it, and nobody agreed to it. An intermediary prevails over common law in some situations, but it's just a good idea not to show your own listings. I believe we do that here in our brokerage. If I have a listing and I have somebody that wants to go see it, I can show them the property, but you got to be really careful what you say because you could end up in this situation right here where I'm implied that I'm representing them when I'm actually doing the buyer, which could get your broker into a lot of trouble and you as well.
So to avoid that, it's just like.
So to avoid that, either what I've been doing is I'll go out and I'll show my own property, but I'll bring one of our agents with me. So if the guy starts wanting to talk numbers or something like that, I can say, hey, I've got another agent with us. He can represent you because I'm already representing the seller. But if you don't bring someone with you or do something like that, then yeah, you could very easily accidentally put yourself into a dual agency with that.
That's why it's best just to disclose it. I did a showing for one of my clients' houses once, and it was like, as soon as the other people got there, I was like, by the way, I represent the sellers. So if you have any questions or anything like that, I can answer them to my ability, but if you want to start negotiating something like that, I'm not the one you need to start talking to. You need to find an agent. Like I just said that out front, just so there wasn't any. They couldn't go home and be like, "Well, I didn't know." It's like, "Well, yeah, you did." It's like, yeah, it's like I told you immediately. Yeah.
And that's a good idea to do. Just tell them up front when you go out and show. If you are going to go show your own property, a lot of the times, I know Mr. Nobles, he won't even let you go and show your own property. He'll say, "Hey, you can show it, but we could pass it off to one of our other agents." And then you get a referral fee or something. You arrange something with that agent to get a referral fee. But if you don't disclose that, or if you don't bring someone, you could very easily get yourself into a dual agency, which could get you in a lot of trouble. So when representing more than one party, you can also run into volatile issues, very volatile issues. So usually the plaintiff is going to win. Plaintiff would be the one that actually brought forth the legal actions. Because in a intermediary situation, it can turn into a he said, she said situation pretty quick, and it can get real messy. So some brokerage, they won't even allow intermediary status at all. Some brokerages are like that. They just won't deal with it. They don't want to bring on the liability. They want to deal with all that. And some brokerages won't even let you show any properties that aren't in their system or isn't one of their listings. They won't even let you show it. Some brokerages are like that. So you just got to be aware of those things when you're going into a newer brokerage or brokerage. Just know what you're getting yourself into. You might get an 80 or a 90-10 split or a 100-0 split, but they'll be charging you for every little thing you do. So just be aware of that. But yeah.
Like I know Justin doesn't even like allow intermediaries. Like he will under certain circumstances, but I can't just go out and get an intermediary status between two people. Like it's a thing that like if I want to do it, I have to talk to Justin. He will like sit down with me for an hour and we'll talk about why it's a good idea or a bad idea and whether we should do it or not. And like that's why I know, like you said, you were one before, and like I almost was one, but it was again between my dad and his best friend. So we kind of talked out and realized that like, okay, well the best way to do this would be this. So I called both of them, and like all four of us talked together in a meeting to figure it all out. And it's like that's kind of the only way that.
It's the only way you can.
Yeah, because he's not a person that like I can't just come in and be like, cool, I got 6% on my thing going, and he's not gonna be like high five. He's gonna be like, oh god, what did you do? It's like figure them out from there. So yeah, like, even he doesn't like allow it. Like he will under certain circumstances, but it has to be. You have to talk with him first and let him figure that out with you, I guess.
Yeah, it just depends.
Yeah.
And if he does decide to, in that case, yeah, he would probably call in all parties into the office and be like, hey, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
This is why we're doing it. The crazy thing is a lot of sellers hate giving the full 6% to one person. I don't know why it is. It's kind of baffling. Justin told me about it, and baffling to him too. They would rather give 3% to one agent and 3% to another, rather than someone getting a full 6%. They'll look at it like, hey, why are you getting $30,000? So let's play this out. Let's say I have a listing. And then someone comes and so let's say I have a listing. You know what? I lost my train of thought. Never mind. Sorry about that. But yeah, it can get very volatile. Just know what you're getting into. So it just depends on the situation if you're actually going to do a dual agency or not. So intermediary is only permitted if you get written consent of all parties. Like I said, it's got to be written consent. And written consent states the source of compensation. So it's going to say, who is getting paid and where the commission is coming from. So you have to have these two things for it to be an actual intermediary, for you actually be able to do an intermediary. And they need to be informed, like I was saying. They need to understand what they're getting into. So. Okay, that's there it is. Okay. So yeah, let's play that out. Let's say I put a house on the market, and I find a buyer within 2 days, and I say, hey, I'll write the offer for you. I'll do the offer, and I do the offer for the buyer. I bring it to my seller within 2 days of putting it on the market, and I say, hey, here's an offer, here's that, and by the way, here's my intermediary status at the bottom. A lot of the times they'll ask you like, why am I paying you so much? It took you 2 days of work, but they don't actually see all the stuff that you did in that 2 days. They just see you hear, hey, he put in the contract, he put it on the MLS, and then 2 days later I have an offer. That's all they see. So
yeah, for us it almost seems like the shorter amount of time we work, the more we should get paid.
Yeah,
it seems
they
like
see like
the complete opposite to them, and that's why it's like, hey, I'm getting this 6% for 2 days of work.
Yeah, if I meet your house in 2 days, I did a really good job. So
yeah, I don't get why they.
You should be very proud of me.
And from the time that I made a contract with you saying, hey, I'm gonna put this on the market, from when I put it on the market, I've already done like 90 steps that they haven't seen.
Yeah.
there's like 90 things that I have to do. So, yeah, I'm not sure why it is, but they don't like paying the same person 6%, even if it's a smaller. Of course, if you're doing like a much bigger transaction, like $1 million or more, they probably don't even want to pay you that 3% at that point. 3% of $3 million. And that's $90,000. So, but yeah, it has to have written consent of all the parties, and it has to state the source of compensation. We have to say where I'm getting paid and how much I'm getting paid for it to actually be an intermediary, for it to be permitted as an intermediary. So sometimes you may not even need an intermediary form. Sometimes a written listing contract or a buyer's agency contract might be sufficient. It really just depends on the situation, and that would be something you would want to ask your broker on. Do we actually even need an intermediary status? He's probably going to say, yeah, I want you to fill out one anyways. But in some situations, you may not even need it. All right, so intermediary brokerage. So an associated license holder may act as an intermediary if the broker appointed them to communicate with and carry out instructions of their assigned party. Not of the other party, only of their assigned party. Written consent required from both parties, like I said, and all parties must be notified in writing. Also, the appointed licensees can give opinions and advice to their assigned party. We have some diagrams we're going to go over that I'll be able to explain it better with those. But in order for me as an associate license holder or an associate licensee, I have to be appointed if I want to work as an intermediary, because only the broker, remember, can work as the intermediary. So if the broker is acting as an intermediary, he may not disclose any buyer negotiating positions. Of course, you don't want to give away any personal information. Same with the seller. Don't give away either of those. You can't disclose any confidential information and to treat a party dishonestly. You cannot do that. You can also not violate the Texas Real Estate License Act or TRELA. So basically, if you're a broker acting as an intermediary, you're just a glorified paper pusher at that point. You can't give any advice or opinions to either party. You just kind of have to follow orders and put in the contract or deal with all that. But that's basically it. Someone starts asking me about numbers or my advice on something, and you say, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. Can't say anything. But that's if the broker is acting as the intermediary. Excuse me. Okay, so the appointment process. Advice and opinions from appointed licensees. Appointed when and where, or who and when. So if I'm appointed to be an intermediary, if I'm appointed to this person, I can give them advice, I can give them opinions, and the term, we give you who. Now when is going to be when it closes. I agree to work as an intermediary until closing. Timing of appointments, any written notification to principals, to be able to appoint, written consent to act as intermediary and to make appointments. So it has to be at least 2 associates. You must have at least 2 associates if you're being appointed, because one has to go for each party. Excuse me. At this point, though, in the appointment process, this is when the broker is actually going to be the one that steps in. He's going to say, at this point, normally he wouldn't have done anything up to this point. It would have just been you and your client. But at this point, once you get to the appointment process, this is where the broker is going to step in and appoint 2 people. And if you have been appointed, like I said, you can give advice and opinions. If you have not been appointed to someone, you can't, and you're working as an intermediary, you can't really say anything to them. Yeah, so at least 2 associates, and you have to be appointed there. So here's an actual example or a sample of an intermediary relationship notice. Notice we have the parties up here. We have the seller, the landlord, the prospect, the broker's firm, the property date, and down here you'll see appointed. This is where the part where the broker will actually appoint you. He'll put, say, Travis Stahl right here is appointed to the owner, and then Wyatt, Campbell is to the prospect. So actually right there is what he'll show if he's who he's appointing. If he's even going to appoint someone, because you can see he either will or will not, because he can still technically work as an intermediary, but it's not a good outcome for the clients because they can't get advice or opinions or any of that. So the majority of the time, I imagine they'll probably want to appoint, unless you're in a competing brokerage or you're competing against your broker. Sorry, I got allergies today.
A little stuffy.
All right, so now we're getting into the diagrams. So this one here, this one is actually just seller representation. So this isn't intermediary or anything. This is if I was just representing the seller as an agent. You can see there's a dotted line here between the broker and the buyer customer. Because remember, the customer is not the client. There's only certain things you can give to them. But then we have over here, straight line just to the seller client. So this is if I was just working, like I said, I was just working with the seller representation. Y'all have probably seen, we've shown y'all diagrams about seller representation in the last one, but yeah, so that's seller representation only. Now here is intermediary. You can see this is where the broker himself is working as an intermediary, so he hasn't appointed anybody. In other words, yeah, straight line to buyer and seller client. But like we've been saying, no advice or opinions or anything like that. But he does have a direct line of communication with both of them. And that, like I said, that's if he's if the broker himself is being in intermediary with no appointees. Now we have an intermediary broker with 1 associate as an appointee. I haven't seen this situation happen in real life, but you can see it still has, it's a buyer client, not the buyer customer, goes to the associate, and the associate goes up to the intermediary. So the broker would only be dealing directly with this person, the seller. And over here, it would be the sales agent that works directly with the buyer. You can see a little different. And here you can see nobody gets special treatment or even no personal advice or opinions. And now we have the intermediary broker with 2 appointed, 2 associates appointed. So the intermediary broker, and you can see the same thing. So we have a sales associate in between the clients and the broker on both sides. In this situation, you still okay, so this is without appointments. So these ones haven't been appointed. Sorry, I got confused there. So in this situation, you still couldn't give advice or opinions. We have our clients, each have our clients, but we were not appointed to those clients. We just ended up one day running into each other. Like, oh, hey, my client wants to buy your house, and it's someone in my firm. So yeah, no advice or opinions that can be given there. And then we have, this is where they were actually appointed. So you can see it's a little different. We have the broker, of course, and then appointed associates on both sides are appointed to them. And you can see down here it shows the weight of each, I guess you could say. So the seller has preference, and they can get advice and opinions, and over here the buyer has advice and opinions that they can have. This is the situation when I did intermediary. This is what we did. Well, actually, we did this one. Well, it's not up here, I guess. One more situation, but anyways. So yeah, in that situation, they could give advice and opinions. And in this one, this is where it gets very concerning for if you're a broker. If something like this happens, this is where the broker would probably step in and say, figure out the situation, see what's going on, see why this is the way it is. But it's basically the sales agent acting on behalf of both the buyer and the seller, and you can't do that as a sales agent. So yeah, this would be a little alarming to a broker to see. So there we have some diagrams. So status of appointed brokers. There's intermediary, which would be the agent in this situation. So there's different duties than a single agent. So you have different duties than if you were just working for one side. You have a limited form of representation, and there's certain fiduciary duties that you must do, even as an intermediary. An associate broker may not opt out of agency duties. Basically just means I can't just back out of my duties in the middle of nowhere. Or like, let's say it turns bad, it turns south, and then we're going to start getting sued, and then I know I'm going to get sued, so I'm like, nope, I'm out.
Yeah,
I'm walking. My agency's gone. No, I can't do that.
It's too late.
It's too late. At that point, you couldn't walk out. But there are slightly different duties. Like I said, just limited form of representation. So any concerns related to intermediary practice? There's definitely concerns that can arise. Any possible ethical or legal problems? Was any advice or opinions issued if they were not appointed? Are the appointees equally qualified? One agent might not be as qualified as the other. One might get special treatment. That would be something that the broker would need to decide who to appoint.
You can get in a lot of trouble actually if you're the broker if you assign somebody who's been working in the field for 25 years to one client, and then the other client you assign somebody who gets there for a transaction, because even though you're still assigning them both an agent, you're technically you can be considered taking favoritism on one of them because you're giving them a more experienced agent than the other one. So, yeah.
That's stuff you have to deal with when you're a broker.
Yeah.
I don't envy it.
No.
But yeah, so appointees might not exactly be equally qualified. But yeah, that'd be something your broker would have to decide. And it requires careful training. I don't even know all the ins and outs of intermediary. I haven't done enough of them to know. But yeah, some training would be probably very helpful if you're going to be doing that during your career.
Yeah.
So yeah, trainings can be very helpful. Specialized intermediaries. There's different types. There's different special intermediaries. It could happen during an exchange type of intermediary, any syndications, or any commercial leasing agents. Those are just a couple of specialized intermediaries. We won't go into too much detail on those. So we'll go into intentional and unintended. So unintended dual representation, that can occur when the licensee represents both the buyer and the seller, which you can't do. Remember, it says no dual representation. in-house represents both the buyer and seller, that can lead to some unintentional dual representation, like I was saying. Especially if you're showing your own listings, then you could definitely have that happen. If other brokers represents the buyer and acts on the seller's sub-agents, that could get into some intentional or unintentional dual representation. If the licensee acts as a buyer or a seller, so if I myself am actually purchasing the property, that could lead to some dual representation. And any written agreement with the seller or a verbal agreement with the buyer. So verbal agreement is not enforceable, but it is still an agreement, and I would still be representing him, and that could lead to dual representation as well. So any potential problem areas? Did I have any prior relationships with any of the clients? If I had, say I've known Travis for 20 years and I've worked plenty of deals with him, but I'm selling a property and he comes up and wants to buy that property, my client as the seller is not going to care how well I know this guy. She wants the best care, no matter what. So if I have any prior relationships with someone that's coming in, you just got to be careful there. There could be any potential problems in there if you're doing unintentional or if you accidentally represent. In-house sales, like I said, some brokerages will only. Oops, not too far. In-house sales, that can lead to potential problems, like we were saying. Cooperating or other broker. If the broker is working as a principal, so if the broker himself is actually the one buying the property or selling the property. Adopting a buyer. Yeah, that's a good one. Have you done adopt a buyer yet? Me either. Justin told me to avoid that. I'm not sure why. I haven't run into it yet, but.
Yeah, we did that.
And non-agency. So if any open listings and stuff like that, that could lead to unintentional or intentional dual representation. All right, so our key points for this evening, we went real quick. We didn't have a whole lot of slides to go through. So we do have some sermon discussion questions as well we'll go over, and we have some key points. So our key points for this evening, dual agency is not authorized. At least in Texas, it's not authorized. The broker must agree to act as an intermediary. If the broker agrees to represent a buyer or tenant and a seller or landlord, the broker is the only one that can be an intermediary, so he has to agree to it. So that, yeah, the broker has to agree to it. So any in-house sale is permitted if the buyer is a customer, not a client. So if they haven't signed a rep agreement. Intermediary fiduciary duties can differ as well. Introduce the possibility of an intermediary early. You're going to want to tell them very early on in the process if you're doing an intermediary. Say, hey, this is what we're doing, and then have them agree to it. Intermediaries offer reduced services to all parties. So regardless of what type of intermediary it is, you're still going to get reduced services, unfortunately, if you're the buyer or seller. Intermediaries may be best for in-house transactions. If you're doing in-house, intermediaries might be the way to go. Suggestions for brokers. If you're going to become a broker, you're going to want an office policy, fully understand the concept, and you're going to want it written. You're going to want to write the office policy. And a strong training program, that's critical. Justin has some very good programs here. A lot of other brokerages do as well. So it's just a good thing to have if you're being a broker. And discuss with sellers the net effects of various types of offers. So just explain the effects of your sellers. All right, discussion 1. I think we have 7 total today. Let's see, as an intermediary, what duties do you owe to the buyer and to the seller? Who wants to do this one? Carwan, how you doing?
Good. How about you?
Pretty good. You think you want to do this one?
As an intermediary, I'll do it.
Okay, go for it.
All right. So, what duties do you owe? Just be
As an intermediary, so I'm working as an intermediary for both.
yeah.
Do I owe them?
So you're doing your best to disclose certain information to each buyer and seller without abusing each other's power, without just
Okay,
hide.
you're in the right direction.
Yeah, I know what I mean.
So you're gonna obviously confidentiality. You're gonna want to keep things confidential for both sides.
Yeah.
You still have to disclose everything to both parties, right? Everything that you know.
Mhm.
But actually, if you're working as an intermediary, both the buyer and seller, they're going to get a whole lot less than what they would if you were just their agent. So very close, but yes. Thank you, Mr. Carwan.
Mhm.
What services can you provide as an appointed licensee in an intermediary transaction that you could not provide as a sales associate without an appointment? Let's see. Want to do this one, Joe? This one's a little tough.
Yeah, this one. So, what chapter, what section were we on? We were learning about this. This one here.
What section?
Yeah, like what was the outline of it?
Oh,
The appointment process.
I think that's intermediary brokerage. You mean like which part of the outline is it on? Yeah, that's under intermediary brokerage. So let's think about it. I've been appointed, so I have more power than if I was not appointed. So what could you not provide as a sales associate if I wasn't?
Look at the graphs, the charts.
Yeah.
The one that had without appointments, the one that had with appointments. You go back to those.
Yeah.
Go back one. Between that one and the one before it.
Yeah, this one is without appointments.
Okay, go back. Go back one more. Those, that one, and the next one. This is 2 associates without appointments and then associates with appointments.
Right.
So I should consider comparing those 2 slides basically.
You have like different leverage at different for different seller or clients. Or like a private client?
It just depends on who I'm actually appointed to. But if I wasn't appointed, what could I provide them? Let's say it this way, what could I not provide them? How about that? What could I not? I couldn't give them
advice and opinions.
Exactly. I couldn't give them advice or opinions if I was not appointed. If I was appointed, though, I could give advice or opinions to that one party. So if I'm appointed to the seller, then that's who I could give advice and opinions to. If I'm not appointed, yeah, there's not much you can do. You're pretty much just, like I said, a glorified paper pusher. You're just filling out contracts and sending them back and forth, pretty much. So thank you, very good. Question 3. I gotta get back there. What is an acceptable way for a salesperson to buy a property listed by the firm? That's a good question. Let's do McKenna. How you doing?
Good.
One?
I don't know if it'll be right, though, but
That's okay. Just give it a shot.
I'll try.
So it's if I, as an agent, were going to buy a property that's actually listed by Noble's Realty Group. What do you think I should do in that situation?
Oh, so if you're trying to buy a house within your same firm you work for?
Exactly. If me as an agent are trying to buy in our firm.
Well, isn't that where the broker has to be the mediator? He has to figure out like who can sell it to you.
Right. Yes, in that situation, he would have to work as an intermediary. Because he technically, remember, all the listings are under the broker's name. So in that situation, you're going to want to, if I was buying, I would want to work just as a principal. Like I wouldn't represent myself or anything like that. I would just kind of, your broker would advise you on that, but yes, I just would work as a principal. I wouldn't want to actually do an intermediary and all that. Very good, thank you, Ms. McKenna. What are several ways in which a dual representation problem can arise in real estate syndications? Just ignore the word syndications and replace it with transactions. How about that? It just means transaction. You want to do this one, Wyatt? I gotta pick on you. No, I gotta pick on you, man.
What anybody just said no? I was there's a lot of ways. Dual representation.
Very good, a lot of ways. 100. Very good.
Yeah.
You did it. Remember, like unintentional stuff like that, in-house sales.
Okay.
If I'm doing stuff like that, that could arise, and it could just lead to dual representation. So, it's probably going to be unintentional representation, but it could happen, especially with the in-house firms. All right, question 5. When is the best time to make an intermediary disclosure? Super hard one, Travis. Can you do that one?
Yeah, I would say just as soon as you think you're going to do it. So basically, as soon as it comes up that you're going to be an intermediary, disclose that to everybody immediately.
Immediately. Should it be written?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. You don't want to get caught not disclosing that or
Not
people
right.
saying you didn't, even if you did or whatever. So
That could turn into a mess real
yeah,
quick.
just have them write it out.
All right, question 6. What can an intermediary tell the seller about the broker's background and plans for the property? Let's see. Ms. Vera, it's your turn.
Okay. What can an intermediary tell the seller about the buyer's background and plans for the property? I mean, if it's like a daycare or something and they're planning on turning the property into a daycare, I would say that's the only thing. But other than that, it's got to stay confidential, doesn't it?
It has to stay confidential. You can tell them, you know, something like around the words of, I have a very motivated client or motivated seller. You could say something like that, but as soon as they ask me exactly why he's selling his property, yeah, I would have to keep that confidential. So correct, very good. So what about if the buyer's telling me, what about telling the buyer about the seller's need to sell quickly when the buyer asks, why is the seller selling? Or will you give me a negotiating advice?
No, you can't because you're intermediary. So, I mean, everything is confidential on both sides.
Exactly. Very good. Yeah, you can't really tell them anything in that situation. You just say, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to disclose that information at this time. So very good, thank you. All right, now last one for this evening.
Am I supposed to answer that question?
What?
Am I supposed to answer question 7 also?
No, you're not, but unless you want to, I mean, you can.
Oh, okay. I think I can answer it.
Go for it.
So in this situation, if you're an appointed associate, does that mean that you're their agent, or are you just an associate? Like just somebody that's provided by the broker to help with the paperwork?
So in this situation, I've been appointed. So basically all the other situations, but except this time I've actually been appointed to this person.
Mm-hmm. But you're not their actual agent, is that correct?
Well, technically I am, because I've been appointed.
Okay. So in this situation, I would say you can give them your regular, the regular benefits that an agent would normally give their client, but some of the information still has to stay confidential.
Correct. So if you're representing, or if you've been appointed to the buyer, or I'm sorry, the seller, and then the buyer asks you, why is the seller selling, or will you give me negotiating price? You've been appointed to the seller. Can you say anything to him then?
If the buyer is asking and you've been appointed to the seller,
Yes.
no, because you're not appointed to the
You
seller, you're appointed to the buyer.
You got it. You got it. All right, well, that's all we got for this evening. We got out quite a bit early, so I'm sure y'all are thrilled and super excited, right? It's not Friday, but it's Monday, I'm sorry to say, but that's going to be it for tonight, guys. We'll see y'all here tomorrow.
Good night.
Night, y'all.